Hey everyone, welcome to this review and comparison of different Frosthaven organizers. For those of you who are regular viewers of my channel and might be expecting this to be a software or post-production tutorial, this is one of those rare occasions where I'm actually posting something different, but don't worry, there's more post-production tutorials coming out after this. For those who actually came for this and don't know what I normally do, if you happen to, in addition to Frosthaven, be interested in filmmaking or post-production, check out some of my other videos. A few years ago, when I first got Gloomhaven, I did a comprehensive review of all the different organizers out there for Gloomhaven. And that was something I did because I had to spend a lot of time looking up all the different ones and trying to find out what was good and what was bad and what I liked. I was hoping by the time Frosthaven came out, somebody else would have done the same thing for that, because I wanted to buy an organizer for Frosthaven and was looking and trying to find the same information and had to, again, look up all the different ones separately. There are a couple of reviews out there. Some of them are useful, but really just look at a single organizer, so you kind of have to look through a lot of them to see. And the couple that are out there that actually compare some, I just frankly don't think are very good or useful. There's one out there that really struck me. I don't know if the person who made it was like attacked by an organizer as a child or something, but was very anti-organizer and basically spent the whole thing bashing everything the organizers did and the whole concept of it, and ended by saying, if you just know that if you're getting an organizer, it's because you like building organizers, not because it'll actually make your gameplay work any better, speed things up. Which I fundamentally disagree with. I know that in the case of Gloomhaven, getting an organizer made life a lot easier, made gameplay a lot better, and I think you'll see there's some advantages to doing so in Frosthaven as well. I personally don't like building organizers. I would rather spend my time playing the game or doing other things. But if it's a game like Gloomhaven, I've invested hundreds of hours in playing, and the few hours it took to build that organizer, if that made all those other hours that much more enjoyable, then I think it was worth it. So anyway, what I'm going to try to do is present a sort of unbiased opinion on all these organizers, tell you what I like, what I don't, and try to objectively sort of point out the pros and cons of each, and you can see if any of them are a good fit for you, and kind of knowing what things might be more important to you or less important, even if they're important to me. Hopefully I'm giving you information that helps you make a good decision. I'll note I am not being compensated by any of these companies. I have not gotten any organizers for free or anything. A lot of these I'm just going off what I could find online. I did not go buy all of these, but you can see photos and see reviews on there. And the ones that I actually do have parts of, I'll kind of show you those and talk through what I liked and didn't like about them. I'm going to go through every organizer option that I could find out there. There may have been some that I missed, I don't know, but I did my best looking for them, and as far as I can tell, as of June 2023 when I'm recording this, these are kind of all the options that are out there available. The one exception is the unlicensed one from the Broken Token. I don't want to get into all the history of that, which you can read about in the Frosthaven updates on their Kickstarter page. But basically, that was originally going to be the official one, licensed by Feldherr, and included if you opted for an organizer with their Kickstarter. And then after some revelations about some unsavory things going on there, Isaac and the company decided to part ways with that, and I'm going to stick with their plan. I have a lot of respect for Isaac and how he has approached these things. And so I'm not going to talk about or in any way recommend that organizer in the same way that the company doesn't want to be involved with them. But I have all the other ones that I could find are reviewed here, and we'll go through those. That's going to include the 2 officially licensed options, the one included organizer that comes with the game if you buy it. So I want to talk through that one and see whether you actually need to buy a third-party one, and then several other third-party options that are unofficial, unlicensed, but seem like they would do the job as well. I got a lot of comments on my Gloomhaven organizer review with people asking to review different do-it-yourself options, the piano boxes and stuff like that, and I'm not doing any of those. If you want to do that and put together your own organizer, that's great, more power to you. There are people out there who have advice on how to do that, but for purposes of this, I really limited it to complete organizers that you could buy for someone who just kind of wants a turnkey, like I want to pay money, get something delivered to me, and it has all the pieces already organized to fit Frosthaven, rather than trying to piece together something yourself, which some people have done and come up with some really cool do-it-yourself organizers, but that's just not the point of this review. So if you're interested in that, you can definitely find people who are telling you how to do that. Okay, so before getting into the organizer reviews proper, I do want to mention a couple of things that have changed from Gloomhaven to Frosthaven. So those of you who are familiar with Gloomhaven kind of know where some things are a little different. And I'm not going to talk about changes in the gameplay or the structure of the campaigns and stuff. There's plenty of reviews out there and people talking about that, and you can find lots of information on it. What I want to talk about is specifically some changes to the pieces and things that do affect the kind of storage and organization options and how you want to approach that. So, first off, Frosthaven added these little initiative trackers. So for each monster and each character, there's one of these little pieces, and you can use it at the start of a round when the initiatives are laid out to put them all in order, and you know who's gone, and you can flip them over from red to gray to show when someone is gone and in what order. I think gameplay-wise, this is great. I personally have a terrible memory, and I always get halfway through a round and can't remember, wait, who goes next? Has this character already gone? Did these monsters already go? Blah, blah, blah. So I think this is great. From a storage perspective, it does add another little wrinkle. So you still have, as you did in Gloomhaven, for each character and each monster, you have a figure, so the minifigures for the characters or the little cardboard standees for the monsters. And you have their ability cards, so these things that you flip over to show what they're going to be doing each round. And you still have those from Gloomhaven, but now you have this third thing. So for each monster, when you're pulling it out for a scenario, you now have to find not just the standees and the cards, but also this initiative tracker. And some of the storage solutions do a better job of handling these three things, and some do a little worse job, but so that's something that is different. Second is the map overlay tiles. So these are the things that go onto your map board to show where different obstacles or difficult terrain or whatever are. One of the really obnoxious things I think about Gloomhaven, and I get where they're trying to save money and save weight, is they had a lot of double-sided things. So it'd be one thing on one side and something different on the other side. Frosthaven has done away with that, other than doors where you might have like open door on one side and closed door on the other side, which makes sense. Somebody opens the door, you just flip it over. All the tiles are just one thing on one side and the same thing on the other side, so you don't have to look at both sides. I think gameplay-wise, this is actually much easier. So you don't have to remember, oh, stump, and on the other side of stump is a water tile, and if you're looking for extra water tiles, you have to remember, oh, I gotta flip over these stump ones or these other things, and there's a whole array of challenges with that in some of the Gloomhaven organizers trying to find ways to keep you aware of what was what. I think in some sense this is actually easier storage-wise because you don't have to worry about both sides. You just need to be able to see one side of something and you know what it is. Downside or con to it is it does mean there are actually more of these map overlay tiles, so more things to keep track of in your storage. So that's another change. Thirdly, the map tiles. These are some of the ones from Frosthaven. These are the things you put together on your table to build your board out of. The artwork is new. That's great. They look fantastic. These are still a huge organization problem because you have this giant stack of these and no really good way to store them. In my Gloomhaven organizer review, I recommended what I did, which is get an accordion folder so you can kind of separate these out. So there's a section for each letter, and if I'm looking for, tiles H, I can go in here and find my H tiles. Honestly, I think this is still the best solution for Frosthaven. You'll see when we look at some organizers, people have some different ways of doing this, but none of them are really effective. You still just have this giant pile, and it takes a long time to sort through and find what you're looking for. Not a great storage option, so I would recommend something like this again. Actually, in the sort of beginner version, Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion, which is a separate game some of you might be aware of, they actually did something kind of interesting where you actually lay out the scenario book and the map tiles are just printed on there and you kind of play right on the book. I think actually in some ways that's better because it saves you all these map tiles that you're trying to deal with. It's definitely not as cool. There's something nice about kind of building this out and playing on it. So I don't know what ultimately the right decision is, but I'll say from an organization standpoint, these are still a huge problem. Nobody has really figured out a great solution for. So again, my recommendation would just be purchase a separate accordion folder and do it that way. Finally, if you can't tell from the box size, this is just a bigger game than Gloomhaven. There's more stuff in here. There's more different types of things, more different things to do. From a gameplay standpoint, that's great. I like a lot of the new options. I like some of the different ways that they're arranging how the scenarios work, and the flowcharts and stuff is all great. You can read other reviews and talk about the gameplay. There's lots of stuff out there about that. From a storage and organization standpoint, though, it means there's just that much more stuff to deal with. So, for example, just talking about the monsters. In Gloomhaven, there's 36 different types of monsters and 32 different types of monster ability cards. The slight disconnect there is because some monsters use the same ability cards. So if you have 2 different types of archers, they both use the archer deck. Anyway, 36 monsters, 32 types of cards. That's in Gloomhaven. Frosthaven has 48 different types of monsters. So 12 more, like 33% more, and 42 different sets of ability cards. So there's just that much more stuff to deal with, and kind of everything in Frosthaven relative to Gloomhaven is the same way. There's just more stuff, more different things, and that means there's more different stuff you have to figure out how to store and organize. So again, gameplay-wise, great. Love all the additional stuff included. Organization-wise, it just means there's that much more stuff to keep track of, and that's one of the challenges that any organizer is going to face. So with that, let's get into the actual organizer reviews. Let's start with the organizer that's actually included with Frosthaven, which is this one of these several plastic trays. So I got these kind of 2 larger ones, and then 2 smaller ones that nest inside each other here. And this actually comes with the game when you buy it. It's not an additional purchase. And first off, I just want to say kudos to Feldherr for including an organizer here. This was one of my few gripes with the original Gloomhaven, and I love the game. There's a lot to like about it. But I think when you're buying a game of that scale and paying that amount of money for it, it should include some way to organize this stuff. And also, Gloomhaven is a game, and Frosthaven even more so, that's basically unplayable without some sort of organization. Now, yes, I understand that it would theoretically be possible to play and just have a giant mess of stuff and take a long time finding everything you're doing, and you could do it. But to make the game like move at any sort of speed and be enjoyable, you really need some sort of organization system. Gloomhaven had about 1,700 cards and like 700 little cardboard things and other mini pieces. And there was no organization scheme at all included. You bought the box, it was full of stuff, and you had to come up with some scheme to just get started playing the game. I ended up using a bunch of egg cartons and stuff to organize things and some baggies before I bought an organizer, which was definitely a good decision. But I think when you're paying that kind of money, I think Gloomhaven started at $140, $150. And you might say like, well, that's already pretty expensive. Do you want to pay another $10, $20, $30, $50 added to that base cost to have some sort of organization scheme? Yeah, if you need it. And I would argue actually the opposite, that if I'm paying that amount of money, I want something that I can play out of the box instead of having to, oh my gosh, I already spent all this money on this, and now I have to go spend a whole bunch of money just to get an organizer to make this even playable, or include a whole bunch of my other stuff, like, again, finding egg cartons and baggies and stuff to have some sort of makeshift scheme. So, all that said, kudos to Feldherr for including an organizer with Frosthaven, although I would say it's less of a, wow, you're getting something extra than this is fixing a problem that they should have fixed with Gloomhaven, and they should have done this in the first place. But that said, they have it. That's great. Is this the best organizer out there? No. We'll see some third-party ones that I think are better, and I'll talk about like where they have some advantages over this. But here's the really cool thing. This is going to do about, let's say 80-85% of what your better organizers will do. It's not perfect. It has some problems. I'll go through those. But it's already included. So it definitely makes the game playable. You can open up the box, sort stuff in here, and the game is playable, and you can go ahead and get started without getting a separate organizer at all, or if you're still waiting for an organizer, or you want to play a little bit and kind of see what things bother you in terms of this organization and what you'd be looking for in another organizer, you can do that. The game is playable with this, which is great. Also, you can't beat the value. It's already included in the game cost, so the marginal cost of you getting this is 0, whereas any other organizer you're going to have to pay extra for. Again, not the best one out there, but totally playable, and many people might find this is all they need and you don't need an additional organizer. You can play it, it's there, that's great. Let's talk about the pros and cons of this organizer and what it does well and what it doesn't. As I mentioned, it's these 4 plastic trays that kind of stack up within the box. I really like this one. They've done a really nice job including all the stuff that you're going to need during the middle of gameplay with immediate access. So your conditions, your damage trackers, your loot tokens, they're all in one convenient tray, and after the initial setup and you've gotten the game started, this is really kind of the only one you would need to keep handy. I actually think this is one of the best organizer implementations in terms of that aspect of all the ones we're going to look at. It's got everything that you need during gameplay kind of right here after you've gotten all the other stuff out to start this scenario. There's some decent organization of the cards. There's a lot of different slots to put them in to keep each type of card in its own place. It's not the best card organization we'll look at, but it's not the worst, and it's certainly on par with most of your better organizers, so nothing wrong with this one. It works fine. The map overlay tiles are one of the places where I think this is one of the worst organizers. Not necessarily the worst, but not one of the better ones. You'll see that there's really just a few slots for these. So everything that's like a single hex overlay is all in one long row, and they're all stored vertically, so you kind of have to flip through them like going through a file folder to find what you want. And that's not as good as some of the other ones where you can just kind of see everything. They're all laid out face up so you can immediately kind of see what you're looking for. That's not the end of the world. This is hopefully something, the map overlay tiles, that you're looking for at the beginning of the scenario to get everything pulled that you're going to need during the scenario, so it's not bothering you or slowing you down mid-scenario, but it's definitely not helping a ton with the setup and getting things faster. And this is one place where some of the other organizers will look at, lay these out in ways that make it easier to quickly find exactly what you want. On the positive side, the fact that we don't have those double-sided map overlay tiles like we did in Gloomhaven makes it less of an issue that you have to flip through these, because at least you're not trying to flip through both sides and look at those. So if you're familiar with Frosthaven or Gloomhaven, and you're looking at these trays or looking at the diagram of how all the stuff goes together, you're saying, okay, I can see where all my tokens go, where the map overlay tiles, what you're doing with all the cards. That's great, but what about all the monsters? And that is the weakest aspect of this organizer, and one of the places where you're going to see just about every other organizer we look at does a better job of handling those. Again, you're going to have to pay more for those other options, so you have to decide whether that's worth it to you, but I would say the way this handles the monsters is pretty weak. Included with the game are a whole bunch of little Ziploc baggies, and what they want you to do is just sort all the different monsters into all those different baggies. And then when you're looking for a monster, you look through 48 baggies and find the baggies you want and pull the stuff out of those. I don't think that's great. I don't think it's the most efficient way to do it. Again, totally workable. Game is totally playable, but we're going to see a lot of better options in terms of how to organize the monsters. And you can actually see on the instructions where they show you how to put the game away in the box with this organizer. At the very top, they just have all these tiny little loose things, and those would be the monster bags. I'll also note that the monster ability decks are stored with the rest of the small cards here, which is not unique to this organizer, but we'll look at some others where these are stored with the cardboard standees, which means you only have to look for that monster once and find all its stuff instead of having to find the cards and then separately find the standees. Lastly, most of the other organizers we're going to look at have some sort of an active character tray where whatever characters you're actively using can kind of live in there with their cards and their standee and their little tokens and such, and you kind of have ready access to all of those. So you put the game away and then you come back, you can pull out those characters immediately that were ready to go. This does not have anything like that, so at the end of a scenario, if you do have to put your whole game back in the box, you don't have someplace set up where you can just leave it all out, you have to put each of the characters back into their original tuck boxes. That's probably not a huge ordeal for most people. I personally just hate tuck boxes. I hate putting things in and out of them and trying to get everything to fit, and I always feel like I'm trying to wedge things and I have problems getting the tab back into the top of the envelope. So this is something I really don't like about this one, and prefer the ones where there's some sort of active character tray, so I only have to go into the tuck boxes when I'm switching characters or starting a new character or something like that. If your personal gaming situation allows you to leave all your characters out on a table or someplace else easily accessible, and you don't have to put everything back into the box, which in this case means putting all the characters back into the tuck boxes, then don't worry about that. Not an issue for you. If, like me, you really hate having to put things back into tuck boxes, and you're in a scenario where you have to put everything away back into the box after you're done playing every time, then you might want to think about one of the other organizers that has some sort of active character tray. So, some downsides, but overall, again, this is a totally functional organizer. You can't beat the value proposition of $0 additional once you've bought the game. It makes the game playable. So, again, I'm really glad they included this. I think this is a totally fine organizer, and whether some of the other organizers that might be, 20% better are worth the additional money really comes down to how much you want to spend on this game and how big those advantages they have you think are for your personal interests and pet peeves. So now let's move on to the third-party organizers that you can buy separately if you want something more different than the included organizer with Frosthaven. So I'll start with the two officially licensed ones that these were options to get with the Kickstarter if you were a Kickstarter backer of Frosthaven. And these are the only two officially sanctioned by Feldherr, although we'll see there's plenty of other good unofficial third-party options. And the first of these is from LaserOx, and it's a wooden organizer. One of the kind of cool things about this organizer is that they have two different versions of it. One they call Monster Box, one they call Tuck Box, and it has to do with how the monsters are stored. Personally, as I already mentioned, I hate Tuck Boxes, so I had no interest in the Tuck Box version. But if that's your thing, it's nice they have an option for it, and definitely it's kind of cool looking having the rack of all the Tuck Boxes with the different monster names on it. I think this does a creative job of stacking up the different trays and putting them into boxes so there's kind of less separate things to take in and out of the main Frosthaven box. I really love that the monster cards, the standees, and the initiative trackers all fit into the same place. So this is great. When you're looking for a monster, you find it once, and you've got the standees there, you've got the ability cards, and you've got their little initiative trackers. So everything is there. You don't have to look for the same monster in multiple different places. I actually wish Feldherr would make the monster stat cards the same size as the ability cards somehow, and then it could all fit together. You still have to get the monster stat cards separately, but this is still a big step forward from earlier organizers where you had to find the monster standees and the cards separately, which was pretty much all the Gloomhaven organizers. This does have these active character boxes, which again, I like. These ones have a clear lid that kind of flips open, works pretty well. The conditions you'll see are split into 3 small trays that all stack into one box. This organizer is very big on multiple trays stacking into a larger box for storage. I found it a little pointless in this case. I would have rather had the trays a little bit larger and had them all in 1 or 2 trays instead of having to pull out 3 separate ones. If you're leaving your trays out on the table, as I end up doing, it's kind of irrelevant if they all stack into one box, but if you have to get stuff in and out of the main Frosthaven box more often, it can be a little nice. The damage token tray is nice. It separates all the different numbers. I really like how they handle the bosses with the ability cards and the boss standees all in one place in one giant box that says bosses. I also like that all the overlay tiles live face up so you can immediately see what you're looking for. This is different than, as I mentioned, the included organizer or some of the other ones we'll look at where they stack vertically and you kind of have to flip through them to see what you're trying to find. For an organizer that does have these active character trays, I like that you don't have to break down any of the character tuck boxes, so you have the trays and all the tuck boxes all fit in the box at the same time. This was an issue with some of the Gloomhaven organizers where to fit everything in the box, you moved your active characters into the active character trays, but then had to break down their tuck boxes so that you could fit everything back in, and then when you were switching to a different character, you had to rebuild that tuck box, put the stuff back in, take stuff out of a different tuck box, break that one down. So this way you can just leave all the tuck boxes for all the characters available. This is the organizer that I personally did end up purchasing for Frosthaven, so I can talk a little bit more specifically about this one than about some of the others. I'll say it came packaged very nicely, very securely, nothing was broken. It does require quite a bit of assembly. I think that's probably par for the course for most of the wooden organizers, but again, I can only speak to this one. In my own experience with this one, I tried just kind of punching out the pieces, which is what I was able to do with the Go 7 gaming organizer I bought for Gloomhaven, which I'll talk about later. And it didn't really work. They're kind of like splintering a little bit around the edges, so I did find I needed to use an X-Acto knife to cut them out, which made things take a little bit longer. That is recommended in the instructions to use an X-Acto knife, so it's not like they were unaware of this, and once I was doing that, it worked fine, just made things take a little longer. One kind of cool thing about this compared to some other organizers I've built is that for the most part, you didn't need glue. Everything just sort of snapped together, and I got a little rubber mallet and was kind of able to tap things in, and they fit securely. We'll see how well they hold up over lots of use and in and out of the box. If some of them, start to get a little looser or come apart, I can always, glue them at that point if they need to. But that was a place where it saves some time compared to some of the other ones where you have to glue every single part of the organizer together. In terms of the organization aspects itself, I will note that you can fit all your cards sleeved. So I sleeved all the cards in the box and they're all back in there and they fit. It is a bit of a tight squeeze with that, so just be aware of that, but they do fit, including into the tuck boxes actually. You can get all the character action cards sleeved. The card organization itself, I'm a little frustrated by. I don't think it's great. And specifically, I'd say the way that it divvies up cards and helps you keep track of all the different types is not great. So for one thing, Frosthaven comes with these little divider cards that are designed to work with the included organizer, so you can break things up. So, here this has uncompleted challenges versus completed challenges. They have things where you can separate out what items are craftable, what are not yet available, and so on and so forth. Some of these are oriented vertically like this. Some of the divider tabs are oriented like this with the tab up here. The LaserOx organizer, the way that it puts some of the cards, whether they're vertical or horizontal, doesn't match with these, so some of these divider tabs won't work. I think that's a little obnoxious. It would have been nice for Frosthaven, and I don't think would have been a huge additional cost to include like versions oriented this way and this way, or for LaserOx to include, if they were going to store things this way, to include an alternate version of the divider tab that has the tab where you want it. I think that would have helped. The other thing I'll say is, in terms of the cards, there are different sections, so you can divide things up by section, as you'll see here, but there's not a lot of flexibility in how you do that compared with, say, this one, where you can see there's these adjustable dividers that you were able to move as you needed to get the right amount of storage for each thing, including, if you unlocked some new items or had completed some personal goal cards, you could arrange those and move the dividers to kind of adjust as the size of different decks grew or shrunk. I think that was really cool. This doesn't really have the option to do this. I'll also note even the places where the divider cards do fit in, they get a little smushed when you put everything back in the box the way that it's supposed to be. And I know it would have maybe made the box lid sit slightly higher, but I think they could have made the card trays, stick up another millimeter or two to give clearance for the tops of the dividers to not get smushed by the next thing on top of them. And again, even with all the stuff as it is, this box lid still sits a little bit above the bottom edge of the box anyway. If it's stuck up another millimeter or two, it's not going to be the end of the world, and there's plenty of travel for the box lid to go to get all the way off of the bottom anyway. As you can see, even if it ended up sticking up another couple inches, it's still going to be very secure since the box is so tall and there's so much height that this has to travel past. Right, so I think if the card dividers could have been made that there was enough space to accommodate those and not smush the tabs, that would have been nice. Let's look at getting things out of the box. I will say, compared to my Gloomhaven organizer from a different company, and I'll mention that again later, I found this one a little bit awkward to get some things out of the box. They're kind of jammed in, and I found there wasn't always great angles or places to grip the things that I needed to pull out. Putting things back in the box was very straightforward. It's more just the getting your hands on things to get them out and get the right leverage you need that was a little awkward. And I can't really speak to this for some of the other organizers because I haven't bought them. Personally, for me, I have a dedicated gaming table, so I'm not putting everything back in the box regularly, so this wasn't a big deal for me. But I don't know if I'd recommend this one to someone who's completely unpacking and repacking the game every single time. I mentioned how several of the trays will stack into larger boxes for the monsters and the map tiles specifically. I think this is part of the issue, is I think they were trying to decrease the number of boxes you had to take out, but it would have been easier to keep the trays separate and just have more of them in terms of getting them in and out of the box, rather than some of these very tall ones that are several trays stacked and attached together. On the other hand, then you would have needed lids for them all, so that could have been an issue. This organizer does include a map tiles box as part of it, so you can see all the map tiles are stored in there. You could stack them up in numerical order if you wanted to make things a little easier to find, but it's still not great. You still got to flip through a whole bunch of them to look for things, but at least it has a place to store them rather than just shove them on top of the other stuff, which some other organizers do. I will say I really liked how they shipped this. The wood punch-out boards that had all the pieces that you were going to build the organizer for all fit sort of perfectly in here and were shipped inside this and then this inside one other box so that this didn't get damaged. That was great, very efficient packaging, and again, since they had to send you a box anyway, it's nice they sent you something that you actually can use. I thought that was cool, even though again I prefer an accordion folder to this. So oddly, I feel like I actually listed a lot of gripes about this organizer, which I actually do like quite a bit. If I had it to buy over again, I would probably end up getting the same one, although I found another couple organizers since I was looking for this review that I also like, that I think would also be really good options for me. But overall, I think it works really well. I just think it's important to know the pros and the cons. I mentioned there's the two different versions, the Monster Box and the Tuck Box option. in terms of how the monsters are stored. Obviously, I got the monster box option because, as mentioned, I hate tuck boxes. But I think it's nice that they offer those two different choices. So if you're into tuck boxes or you like the look of having the monsters in all these little organized tuck boxes, it's great that they have that option. I think that one actually is a little more visually attractive if you're just kind of looking at how does the organizer look and how do things look when they're all put away in it. Again, I got the monster box option and I think that works great for me. One last thing I'll note on the LaserOx organizer that probably applies to any of them that are made out of wood or plastic, which is most of the ones we're going to look at, is it does add some more weight to what is already a very heavy game. So with the LaserOx organizer and all the cards sleeved, which actually when you're sleeving like thousands of cards does add a couple pounds of weight, this box itself is now 32.6 pounds, so that's reasonably heavy. If I add the map tiles box to this like this, this comes out to 36.8 pounds, almost 37 pounds. So again, even without the organizer, this was already a very heavy game. But that just adds even more weight to something that's already a pretty heavy box. So just something to think about depending where you're storing this, and you know what your lifting capabilities are. This might be something that, you know, if it's stored high up on a shelf or like low down on a shelf, you want to be really careful not to, you know, bend over and lift with your back because you actually could injure yourself. This is a pretty big game. And again, any of these wooden organizers are going to add even more weight to that. So just something to be aware of. Okay, so next let's talk about the folded space organizer, which is the other of the officially licensed organizers for Frosthaven. And as its name implied, this one, instead of being wood or plastic, is actually made out of folded foam board. So this is actually probably the lightest of the organizers. I can't verify that for sure. I haven't weighed them all. But definitely from other reviews I saw, that's definitely an advantage of folded space, is because it's just made of foam board. It doesn't add so much weight as some of the other ones do to this. This one also has 4 active character trays for the characters you're currently playing with. It has 1 tray for all the condition tokens and 1 tray for all the damage tokens. I like that. Keeps these things like right where you want them and not a whole bunch of separate trays. The card storage, from what I can see, is maybe okay, but I'm kind of skeptical the way these are divided is useful. And in these pictures that I pulled from their website, it doesn't look like they've actually put in all the cards. There's definitely fewer cards in these displays than there actually are in the game, so I think they're trying to make it maybe look a little looser, like it's easier to flip through the cards. I have a feeling that probably these get pretty densely stacked if you actually have all the cards in here. I'll be honest, I don't really like this organizer. I'm glad that they have multiple official options, so you have different choices. I don't like the way that this lays things out. I think it breaks things into too many small boxes. As you can see, there's a ton of little boxes here, and some of these, it's not clear why they're broken up that way. The way the map overlay tiles are put in here, they're vertical and have a bunch of things smushed together, so I think it could be really hard to find what you're looking for. Honestly, this seems like a step backwards from the included organizer from Frosthaven, which did the same with the sort of vertical overlays, but at least they weren't packed so tight, so you'd flip through them a little more. Here, they're really jammed in here, and I feel like you'd almost need to take them out to look through them. Same issue with the monsters, but even worse. So you can see all the monsters are jammed in here vertically, and if you're looking for a monster that might be in the middle of one of these, it could be kind of hard to find what it was, and again, you're going to have to take out a bunch of things and look. I'm not really sure this is any better than 48 Little Baggies, which is the Frosthaven included option, which I already sort of poo-pooed, but I feel like that at least you can kind of spread the baggies out and see what you're looking for immediately instead of having to pull everything out of these. I mentioned that for the monsters, you have the cardboard standees, you have their monster ability cards, and the initiative trackers. In this case, all 3 of those are stored separately. For every monster you're pulling out, you got to look for it in 3 different places. I really don't like that. And in terms of the initiative trackers, if you look at this, they just have 1 bin with all 48 little red pieces of cardboard in here, and you got to search through all of them for the one you want. I can tell you just from doing that when I was initially punched them all out and then was trying to sort them in the organizer, it was taking me forever to find what I was looking for that one time I was doing this that way. I can't imagine having to do this every single time you're playing for every monster you're looking for. I guess if I'm looking for the positives, this organizer does solve the problem of not needing the baggies, so nothing's loose in the box. There's a storage place for everything. And the active character trays mean you don't have to keep going back into the tuck boxes every time you put the game away, which again, I don't want to do that, so it's great that they have those active character trays. But overall, to me, this one really seems more like a storage solution than something that actually organizes the game in a way that helps you play faster. Personally, I would stick with the included organizer for Frosthaven over paying for this one. I don't really see that you're getting any significant benefit over that included organizer, and you'd have to pay for this one. I'm not sure that's worth it. One positive for Folded Space is this is the only company I found that offers a full-on accordion-style folder for the map tiles as part of their organization solution. Now, the good and bad news here is it's not included with the main organizer. So if you buy the Folded Space organizer, you'd still have to buy that accordion folder separately. On the other hand, if you were already buying another organizer or just using the included organizer and wanted this accordion folder, it's available separately, so you could just buy that without paying for the rest of the Folded Space organizer. So could be good, could be bad, depending on what you're planning on doing. I will say their accordion folder is more expensive than just buying one at your local office supply store. So it's not your cheapest option. On the other hand, it has the artwork on it. It looks kind of cool. So if your games are on display somewhere, you have like open shelving, then that might be worth it. It definitely is going to look nicer sitting on your shelf than your standard Office Depot accordion folder. So that's a plus that they have that accordion style folder available. I think that's cool. But overall, this is just not an organizer I would really recommend. So those were the two officially licensed options, the Folded Space one and the LaserOx one. And now that'll bring us to some of the third-party options for Frosthaven organization. Let's start with an organizer from a company called Go7 Gaming. I actually got their organizer for Gloomhaven, and as I mentioned, I've played hundreds of hours of Gloomhaven using that organizer. I really liked it overall. I thought about getting their organizer for Frosthaven as well, but for a couple of reasons decided to go with the LaserOx one instead. But again, I really liked the company and had a good experience with them on my first organizer. So let's take a look at what they're doing with Frosthaven. I think it has a pretty good setup on the conditions and damage tokens. Those are all readily accessible and kind of organized the way you'd want them during a game. The map overlay tiles are easy to see, although it seems like they're maybe split into more boxes than seems necessary and could have been condensed a little bit. And a few of them are stored vertically, although most of them live face up. I haven't played with this one, but based on the pictures and the Gloomhaven one that I've used, it does seem to do a really nice job with card organization. And that was one of the biggest strengths of this organizer for Gloomhaven, I'll say, is I really like how it organized the cards, the movable dividers with lots of different options for where you can move them to, and it held all the cards sleeved with a little bit of wiggle room, which again was pretty nice and not necessarily the case of all the organizers. Like the map overlay tiles, the monsters seem to be split up into more trays than is necessary. In Gloomhaven, it got them all into 2 trays, and here they're split into more than that in a way that I'm not sure why. I do like that it keeps the initiative trackers with the standees, but the monster ability cards are still stored with the rest of the cards. So you don't have to look 3 different places for each monster, but you do have to look 2. This was honestly the thing that kept me from going with this one for Frosthaven. When I saw that other organizers like the LaserOx one had gotten the standees, the ability cards, and the initiative trackers all in one space, you only had to look for things once. After hundreds of Gloomhaven scenarios, I got really tired of having to search for the same monster twice, once in the cards and once in the standees. And the fact that now there's some options that you don't have to do this, I think makes this kind of a step behind. It's not the end of the world, but it's definitely a nice convenience when they're all together, and it's a difference maker to me in terms of making the setup easier and quicker. I would recommend if you get this or any other organizer where the monster ability cards are all stored in a giant stack, you should print out some dividers, or some of the organizers will come with some, that'll help you quickly find the right set of cards. And you can see that's what I did here for my Gloomhaven cards, rather than having to go through just a giant stack of ability cards and try to find where's the one I'm looking for and where are the breakpoints. Like, so you have to look, where's the first card I need, where's the last card I need, as opposed to just having them between the dividers does make that quicker to pull out. Something I'll note with the Gloomhaven one that seems to be the same here with the Frosthaven one is you can see it looks like some of the pieces fit pretty tightly into their slots without a lot of room to reach in and grab them. They include several of these tile keys. I use those all the time with Gloomhaven. It works really well. I don't think it's any less convenient. In fact, sometimes even more than having to kind of dig in with your fingers and pull things out. Works really well. So the biggest unique feature of the Go7 Gaming Organizer is the way that it handles the characters, and this is the same as what they did with Gloomhaven. Instead of having 4 active character trays while all the other characters stay in their tuck boxes, this one puts every character into its own wooden tray from the start, and then you ditch the tuck boxes entirely. This does mean you may get some spoilers as you're not careful when you put things away. So when I was transferring Gloomhaven from the tuck boxes into here, I was actually doing these under the table so I wasn't looking and accidentally seeing some classes that I hadn't unlocked yet. You also need to find some way to note on the character boxes which ones are still locked and which ones aren't, because once you've taken them out of the tuck boxes, you no longer have the seals as that marker. And also, once they're in the boxes, you can't easily see what each character is since the display window is on the front. In my Gloomhaven organizer review, I noted that I printed out little icon stickers for the tops of these boxes so I could see what they were without pulling them out, and use little post-its to mark on the top which ones were still locked. That worked out fine for me. It's a little bit of extra work at the start, but not a big deal and makes this a lot more usable. Something I really liked about this setup is you never need to put anything back in a tuck box again. The character minis, all their cards, any additional tokens or standees all go into that one character box. You grab that box and you have everything you need for that character. In fact, as I mentioned, you can literally throw the character tuck boxes away after you've moved everything into this organizer. It's a very different setup than any of the other organizers we're going to look at that all rely on the tuck boxes for most of the characters, whether or not they have active character trays. Whether you like this setup or not is kind of up to you. Part of the reason that this organizer worked great for me with Gloomhaven was that when I was playing Gloomhaven at the start, I was in a pretty unusual kind of gaming situation where we were playing Gloomhaven regularly, but the people who were playing changed just about every scenario. We almost never played with the same set of people from one game to the next. So you can imagine, as everyone was playing different characters and we were swapping out people every scenario, basically, there would have been a ton of putting things back into tuck boxes and then taking something else out to go into the active character tray. And then at the end of that scenario, you got to put those back in the tuck box as somebody else might be playing the next time you play. In this case, it was great. Everyone just shoved their stuff back into these little boxes, put it back in the box, and boom. Next time we played, whoever happened to show up and be playing that time could just reach in, grab their box, and open it, and they were ready to go. I realize this is a pretty unusual scenario, so I would not necessarily say that's a reason to buy this. It was specific to that particular time in my life and the game group I was playing with. But if you do happen to be in a scenario where you do expect that from scenario to scenario or play session to play session, you're going to be trading out what people you're playing with almost every time, then I probably would recommend this organizer over any other just for that aspect of the way that it transfers the characters into these boxes and you don't have to deal with the tuck boxes anymore. In this case, now as I'm starting Frosthaven, I'm with a regular group that it's the same people playing just about every time, so we don't have to deal with that problem. So that wasn't a factor for me this time, but I will say it worked out great for me when I was playing Gloomhaven, again, in what was a somewhat unusual scenario. Overall, I still really like this one. I had a great experience with my Gloomhaven one. I wouldn't have been upset about getting this organizer again, but given that I was playing with now a group where it was the same people every time, and really wanting something that kept the monster standees and their ability cards and the initiative trackers all together in one place instead of having to search multiple places, was the reason I decided not to go with this one for Frosthaven. Okay, so at this point, having gone through 4 organizers, we've seen most of the distinguishing features that an organizer might have or not have, or how it might choose to lay things out. So I'm going to try to go through the rest of these a little bit quicker and really just focus on here's the good, here's the bad, and most of these are just going to be combinations of different aspects of things we've already seen. So hopefully that allows it to go a little quicker. And we'll start with a couple of European ones. The first one is from a company called Feldherr. This is a plastic organizer rather than wood, so might be a little bit lighter. It says it will hold sleeved cards if you want to sleeve all your cards. The map overlay tiles are separated out into different slots, which is good. They're still stored vertically, so again, that's not my favorite. It might be a little hard to see what you're looking at, but that's better when they're in different slots than when they're all sort of jammed together into one slot. I think you'd have a little easier time seeing what you're looking for. This one stores the initiative trackers and the monster standees together, but keeps the ability cards separate. That's similar to the Go 7 Gaming one. This does provide space for all the cards, but as far as I can tell from the photos online, which admittedly are not great, they're not really separated out or labeling kind of what's what or where breaks between different groups of cards are, so potentially it could be hard to keep track of what cards go where. This looks like one where maybe you would want to print out some dividers that you can stick between different groups of cards to help you keep track of that a little better and see where the breakpoints are. I think that the monster ability cards are separated by tiny dividers, which would make it a little easier to know where one specific monster's batch starts and ends. If that's in fact the case, that's kind of a cool design. I like it. Again, I would rather see them with the monster standees, but at least they're kind of breaking those out so you can hopefully grab a group of cards that you want a little quicker. This one mimics the included Frosthaven organizer in a way that I like, with having all the conditions, damage tokens, and scenario aid tokens all in one tray. That's most of the stuff you're going to need during the game, so that's very convenient if you can just grab that tray, have that available after everything else is set up, and that's most of the stuff you're going to need while you're in the midst of a scenario. Also, like the included organizer, but in this case on the negative side, there's no active character trays for this one. Everything has to go back into tuck boxes every time you're putting everything back in the box. Again, not a big deal if you have a place where you're going to just leave your game set up. If you do have to repack it every single time you're done playing, I would find that pretty obnoxious, having to put everything back into the tuck boxes. Overall organization of this one is not bad. I'd say it's a little haphazard. It seems like some things are more about where did we have room than where does it make sense to put them. Like the loot tokens, which are something that you're going to be using during the scenario, are in with one of the monster trays, which is usually something that you would get the monsters you need at the beginning and then kind of set those trays aside. So not terrible organization, but not necessarily great. I don't think this is one of my favorites. It seems like it's probably workable. It seems honestly most comparable to the included organizer, which if I like that design, I'd probably just keep that one instead of paying for a separate organizer. Let's take a look at another European one. This is from a company called E-raptor. They also did have a Gloomhaven organizer that I reviewed in my Gloomhaven organizer roundup. Like the LaserOx organizer, this one's made out of wood and supposedly pieces snap together with no glue required, like that one. And like that one, or the Feldherr one, says it will hold sleeved cards and has enough room for those. This is another one where the monster ability cards, the standees, and the initiative trackers all go together. There's even a little cutout on the bottom under this box to push them up, makes them easy to get. And each compartment is labeled, which is not true in the LaserOx one. I really like the design of this. As we're looking through these images, you might notice that it looks like some of the monsters are not stored with their cards. It's because these are monsters that don't have their own unique cards. So again, maybe there's a couple of different archers and there's one archer deck of cards which is stored with one of the monsters, and then the other monsters are stored separately. It's not ideal that they're not always right by their card. This is something I thought the LaserOx one actually does well, is if there's things that share a card, it keeps those right together so you can see all the monsters that would share that card and they're right near the card. But this is relatively minor. That's not the case for most of the monsters. As I mentioned, there's 48 different monsters and 42 different ability card decks, so there's only a few that share cards. The boss standees and the boss ability cards go together in one box. Again, I like that. I think there's a good layout of the item cards, and this does manage to utilize the dividers that come with the game, whereas I mentioned the LaserOx one had some issues with some of those. Damage tokens, conditions, and loot tokens are each in their own box. Might be a little more convenient if those were all in like one tray, but again, they're still clearly organized. There are 4 active character trays, which I like, and all the map overlay tiles are visible, and I like that. You can see here, like the folded space one, this does have a separate add-on option to store the map tiles, but this is just literally a giant wood box. So it's not really doing anything for organization, it's just a place to store those, and it would not fit in the Frosthaven box. You'd have to store it separately. So again, I would go with an accordion folder, or if you wanted to buy the folded space accordion folder, you could do that instead. I don't think this is a great map tile storage option. I'll be honest, I actually like this organizer quite a bit. If I had found this one ahead of time from when I was purchasing, I might have ended up getting it instead of the LaserOx one. I'm not sure. There's some things I think it does better, some things I think it does worse, but I think this is a really solid option. I really like how it stores the monsters, and everything seems like it's pretty clearly laid out. The one big negative is I would say it looks like there's a lot of small boxes and just a lot of things to take in and out of the box every time, again, if you have to pack and repack the whole game. For instance, just looking at the map overlay tiles, those are divided into 7 different boxes, as opposed to the LaserOx one has them in 4 trays. So that's almost twice as many different things to take out. And again, the LaserOx one, those trays combine into one box. So theoretically, you can just kind of take it all in and out at one time. That's not a huge negative or a deal breaker, particularly if I can leave this stuff out somewhere. But it might be a little obnoxious. Again, I like this one quite a bit. I think this is a really solid option based on what I can see online, not having played with it. This final group of organizers are all ones that are available on Etsy, or at least that's where I found them. Some of them might be available elsewhere. And I'll go through these pretty quickly. The first one of these is from a seller called FrostbittenTwiceShy. This is a plastic organizer, unlike most of the other ones we've looked at that were wooden. So that might mean it weighs a little bit less. This is the only one of all the organizers I found where the monster standees literally have custom cut spots to go in that are shaped like that monster. So that looks kind of cool and makes them all very visible. They're all face up and in their own slot, so it's very clear what goes where. That can be a little helpful when you're putting things back away. The initiative trackers also go with them. There's a designated slot for each right by where the monster goes. So that's cool. The monster ability cards do not. They're stored with the rest of the cards. So this would again be one of those cases where you do have to look two different places. One place for the ability cards, one place for the standees and the initiative tracker. I think probably because the monster spots are custom cut, this results in a little more dead space in terms of the trays. So they do have to split these across more trays. Most of the other organizers had a few small number, 3 or 4 monster trays. This one has 8. So it does mean just more separate trays you'd have to take out when you're looking for the particular monsters that you need. Again, if you're in a scenario where you have to take these in and out of the box every time. Conditions, damage trackers, and loot tokens each have their own tray. So again, that's kind of nicely organized there and pretty clear how things divide up and not split out into too many trays in that case. The map overlay tiles are nicely organized. They're all face up and laid out well across 3 different trays. That looks very easy to find what you're looking for. The cards look to be relatively well organized. I can't tell for sure. There's not great pictures of this one. The one thing I would note is they're split across 6 different boxes. Now that can be helpful in terms of the organization. So you can say like, oh, I'll grab this box for these cards, this box for these cards, and you always know exactly what you're getting. On the downside, if I'm trying to take everything in or pack everything back up in the box, having to get that many boxes just to get all the cards out is a little annoying compared to some other organizers where all the small cards might be in 1 or 2 boxes or all the large cards in 1 box. And so there's just less different trays or boxes that you're taking out. As far as I can tell, there are no active character trays in this one, so this would be another one of those cases where every time you're packing things up, you have to put everything back into the character tuck boxes. Not a huge fan of that, but the other organizational aspects of this seem fine. Next eBay one I'll look at is from a seller called Saimlab, S-A-I-M Lab. I hope that's how you pronounce it. This is another wooden organizer. Claims that it holds all the cards sleeved, and it does include dividers for the cards, which is nice. The cards seem to be pretty well organized. There's lots of dividers available and some flexibility about where you put them, kind of like the Go 7 Gaming one. I like that. I like flexibility in my card organization, particularly for a game like Gloomhaven or Frosthaven that has so many cards. This is another one where the monster standees, initiative trackers, and the monster ability cards are all stored together, labeled, and have a slot underneath to push them up, just like the E-raptor one. Again, I like that a lot. I think that's a great design. The map overlay tiles are all face up and visible and all lay flat. That's great. I think this looks fine in terms of how you can see everything and access it. It does look from the images like the dividers between the different map overlay tiles are only partial, like they don't go all the way up or all the way through. And it does look like things from one area could kind of slide into the other. So depending on how much your box get jostled, I would worry based on the look of this. Again, I haven't actually tried it, that you might get some overlay tiles slipping into the container that another one were in, or into the slot where another one was supposed to be, and then maybe covering something up. You're like, oh, why can't I find this? Because it's covered up by something else that slid in there. Again, I can't guarantee that. I'm just saying based on what I'm seeing here, it looks like that might be an issue. I've seen it in some other organizers. They have one giant tray for conditions, damage trackers, and loot. That's cool. I mentioned with the included Frosthaven organizer that I like that design. There's one tray with most of the stuff that you're going to need to access during the game, having that all very convenient. The one thing I'd note with this, and again, I haven't tried it just from the visuals, it does look like the slots where the condition tokens go are tiny but very deep. I wonder, depending on kind of the size of your fingers, if these would be an issue getting them in and out mid-game, like if they're hard to kind of reach in and pry something out, if they're really that deep and tiny, particularly if you have larger fingers. Again, can't guarantee that, haven't tried this, but it's just something I noted from the images that I would have a question about. Overall, this seems like another decent option. I like most of the way this is organized, other than potentially an issue with the depth of the slots in the tray where the conditions are stored. I will note there's a kind of weird thing, and I'm not really sure what to make of this, but where they're showing how the game gets put away back in the box. There's just kind of an odd picture that shows all the map tiles and the health and XP trackers just kind of thrown in the bottom of the box, which seems like things would probably get bent and damaged. And I don't know if that's how they're intending to store this, if those need to be there to raise things up a certain way or not. It just seems strange. I think there's lots of bad ways we've seen for how to store the map tiles, and this might be the worst. Just throw them all in a pile on the bottom and then shove a bunch of other things on top of them. The final organizer we'll look at that I also found on Etsy is from a company called Gaming Trunk. And I do want to note this one, they do have their own website apparently. I tried it a few times, like a week apart and then another week later. And every time I tried to go to their website, my browser blocked it and said it was some sort of malware or other malicious site. So I don't recommend going to it. I think if you are interested in this one, maybe try it through Etsy. But I will say that experience just made me a little skeptical of this whole one. So I'll review their organizer, but take it all with a grain of salt. I'm a little sketchy about this because, again, their website was showing up as being infected with malware, and that's not a great sign. This one was another wood one with laser cut wood. This one does have kind of an interesting idea for how to store the monsters, where they store the standees and ability cards together, which we've seen in other ones, but store them vertically instead of laying down. That probably saves on some space. I'm not 100% sure how easy it would be to find things, but there's labels on each slot, and it looks like there's some separation between them. So my sense is this probably would be a pretty functional design, and you'd still be able to find things pretty quickly, just a little different than what everyone else was doing. It's unclear from the pictures online or the description where the initiative trackers go. I don't see them anywhere else, so my best guess is these are stored in that same spot, in that vertical storage, but I just can't see them, so I'm not 100% sure. In terms of just keeping things simple and minimizing the number of trays, this might be the best organizer I've looked at. There's one tray for the monsters, one that has all the cards, the boss standees, and the health and XP trackers, and then 3 trays for the conditions, damage trackers, and the map overlay tiles. And those trays stack into one the same way that the LaserOx does. So they kind of become like one box of stacked trays. So in that sense, there's actually a fairly minimal number of things you'd be moving in and out of the box, which could be kind of convenient, again, if you're packing and unpacking a lot. Oddly, there are 3 separate boxes for the cardboard boxes with the character minis. Just about every other organizer just keeps those in one spot, so this one splitting them into 3 was kind of strange. I'm assuming that was just a function of how their other trays laid out and trying to get everything to fit back in the box properly. And again, those aren't things you need to take out all the time. You're not taking out every single character all the time, but just kind of a little weird with that. But generally, kind of minimalistic number of trays. So if that's something that appeals to you, this might be worth looking at. This is the only organizer I saw that includes a box for the map tiles that actually fits back into the Frosthaven game box. Again, it's not an organizer. The tiles are all just sort of shoved all in there, and you'd still have to look through them trying to find the ones that you want. But it is a box for them, and it does fit back into the main Frosthaven box, which none of the other ones really seem like they would be able to do. So again, if you want to get everything back into one box and that's your primary goal, then this would be maybe something to look at for that. This organizer does not have active character trays. So again, for me personally, just hating tuck boxes, that's kind of a deal breaker if I have to put all the characters back into the tuck boxes every time after I'm done playing and trying to store the game away. Other than that, this is kind of a nice design. I always think it's good when there's options, and the fact that there's lots of different Frosthaven organizers, you'd like them to do different things so you can kind of think about what works well for you. And where most of the organizers have gone with smaller trays but a larger number of trays, this one has kind of gone the opposite direction with a smaller number of trays and each of them holding more things. If that appeals to you, it's great to have an option for that. I think the way that it stores the monsters is really kind of interesting, and I like it compared to some of the ones where the cards and the standees are stored separately. But even compared to all the other ones storing them flat and face up, it's nice to have an option that stores them vertically and kind of fits them all into one tray neatly there. So I think that's a cool option. Again, the no active character tray is probably a deal breaker for me. The bigger one with me for this is, again, just the whole thing seemed kind of sketch that their website doesn't work and is blocked by my browser when I'm trying it multiple times. If you order it through Etsy, it's probably okay. I don't really want to recommend it. or tell you not to buy it because I don't know what the situation would be. I'm just making you aware of the information. But in terms of the organization, it seems like this is probably a decent option. And that's it. We took a look at the organizer that's included with Frosthaven and then 8 different third-party options. So lots of choices, lots of possibilities for what you can go with. I hope that was useful to you, whether you end up buying an organizer or not, to get a sense of what's out there, what some of them do well, what they don't, and what things you may want to look for in an organization solution if you're putting together your own system for how to organize things to sort of do it yourself. Hopefully you got a sense of some ideas of ways to do that and things that can work and some things maybe you don't want to try. Wherever you go from there, hope it was useful for you and happy Frosthavening.